Welcome again to the July Dr. NAACLS. We're talking about site visit preparation for program directors. A quick date stamp on this, it's July 27th, 2022. The reason we do this is that if you are watching this on demand at a later time or referring back to it, just know that our core documents do change at least twice a year, specifically the standard compliance guide, which will be discussed a lot on this call. So if you're unaware, if you have the most recent document, go to the website. We're going to go through a little website tour where you can find the documents in this presentation, or you can always contact NAACLS staff. Today, we have Candy Hill, who is an MLT educator on RCAP. She also previously served as RCAP chair. Also, Michelle Gianosa, who's the program accreditation coordinator, Mercy. And I am Mark Spence, program approval coordinator. So let's talk about getting ready for the site visit. First of all, we're going to start with really the initial roles of the program director as they're organizing the site visit, or specifically the stakeholders involved with the site visit on the program side. So Candy, you have experience as a program director hosting site visits, as a site visit team member and team leader. So what advice do you have for program directors as they're initiating and working through this process with communication?
Well, I think the biggest thing is going to be communication with all of these stakeholders. Throughout this presentation, you'll see different things that you're expected to do as a PD setting up the site visit. I would say that, being in contact with your administration is always going to be the first thing that you want to do, especially when it comes down to scheduling the dates for your site visit. A lot of times they like to be involved in this process. And so I think that it's always a very good thing to find out when they're available because they want to participate. Of course, your clinical preceptors, your advisory committee members, those people you might want to just put on notice that you are having a site visit. And then once you get an agenda down and you know when you're going to schedule some of these interview processes that these people will be involved in, then you can reach out to them to find out availability on when they can come and hopefully talk to the site visit group. The employers also kind of fall into that contact. And then you've got your students and your alumni. Again, I usually just warn my students that we are up for accreditation and that they're going to be here during this time and that we will, have a specific time for the students and alumni to speak to the site visitors. So all of this we'll talk about a little more specifically when we start looking at the setting up the agenda. So we'll hit on these a little bit more later. There's always going to be some post-site visit communication. It may be with NAACLS. It might be with committee members from the review committee as they are looking through your documents. So just always be, aware that when you get an email from someone representing NAACLS, that you do establish that communication and you respond as soon as you can, because a lot of times we have deadlines to get reports completed, and so we're just trying to get everything together so that it can move through that process. But other than that, that pretty much takes care of all of the communication pieces, but you really just need to make sure that everybody is on board.
So just a reminder that NAACLS has resources that can assist you with setting up the site visit, preparing for the site visit, things of that nature. Obviously, NAACLS staff can help with process-related items. If you have questions about standard interpretation, the DLPs are available, and we'll get into the DLPs a little later before question and answer. But Candy, do you have anything or experience as a site team leader or preferences, things that you've seen from work from program directors when you're maintaining and establishing this communication between a site visit team leader and a program director?
Well, you know, again, an initial communication, setting the stage, developing your agenda, things that we've already previously discussed. I will mention here though, Mark, another resource that some of our new program directors have is a volunteer mentor. And they're a resource if you come into you know, a question about one of the standards, they can always kind of help you too. But use your resources. I have served as discipline lead for the MLT program. And, you know, there was a lot of questions that as you're putting together your site visit, as you're putting together your self-study, there's a lot of questions that come up. And having someone that you can email directly and get a response a lot of times will help you move forward with your site visit.
I haven't been in this specific situation because I haven't been a site visitor or a program director. Are there more responsibilities on one party, for example, establishing the schedule, or is it more of a collaboration between the site visit team leader and the program director?
It is initially just a collaboration between the two. We'll talk and we'll look at a suggested agenda for the meeting. But typically, the program director is responsible for putting that agenda together.
Okay.
Before it's finalized, they do need to run it past the team coordinator to see if there's any changes. And then any changes that are made, then all of the meetings can be finalized and set up for the visit.
Okay. So I'm going to hand this off to Michelle to talk about the web resources we have. And specifically when we mentioned this first part is really kind of how we utilize cloud technology to gather your materials and who's responsible for what when it comes to organizing those materials.
Sure. So normally as before the site visit even gets there or gets to that step, staff can provide the program director the link for Box to upload your self-study. Since we are no longer accepting flash drives or even paper copies at this point, we are all electronically, so you can use the cloud to upload the box, or if it happens to fit in the email, we're happy to take it that way as well. Once we have your site visit scheduled, we normally upload your self-study, the self-study review, and your self-study review response, which is usually why we give pretty hard deadlines of when a response is due, just so that then our site visit team has access to these documents along with the program director too, so that they can start reviewing and preparing for their site visit coming up. Sometimes the site visit team will ask for some additional documentation, and we normally can give the program director editing permission. I believe you just have to make a free account with that, as Mark has mentioned on the PowerPoint. And then we can give you access, and some program directors will break it down by standard and then name them by file type, which is great for the site visit team, and it's easy then for them to access additional documents that they need. We also do the request that you don't make any changes to your self-study, the original one, but if for some reason, if you do make changes, we have to document on each page that you make an edit so that the site visit team then is aware that a change was made from the original copy that staff received.
Yeah, I would just say, just try to avoid editing the self-study at all costs. It's cumbersome to manage from a volunteer standpoint. From a staff standpoint, it can provide challenges if a program should go and do an appeals process. So I would just consider, once that self-study is submitted, consider that locked and unavailable to edit. And then if you have to provide additional documents, Michelle gave great examples. Organize it by standard, label them very, very specifically, because if your volunteers and your site visits can easily find what you're providing, it means they can easily remove concerns and they don't have to bring issues up again in the site visit because they couldn't determine what documents applied to what. So let's do a quick website tour just so everybody knows where to find some of these documents. The Standards Compliance Guide and the Standards and Standards Compliance Guide and those items are rather easy, but there's some other important documents that I'm not sure if program directors know that we make accessible. So here you see the NAACLS homepage. You're gonna want to go to the program directors page. And really this resource bar right here is going to be very helpful. This is where we put all our most up-to-date documents. You have the standards, you have the guide to accreditation, you have the Standards Compliance Guide. So for the site visit, I would assume, and Candy, please still correct me if I'm wrong, probably the 2 of the 3 most important documents are the standards and the Standards Compliance Guide. Standards will have, you know, what we are ultimately looking for compliance, and the Compliance Guide tells you how to get there, and specifically items that we'll be looking for in the site visit. So if you are new or haven't been into the Compliance Guide in a while, you will see, I have to scroll down because standard 1 is a lot of self-study documentation, but you will see under each standard, we have requirements for the self-study. And then we also have what we're looking for, so proof of documentation on the site visits. So we do try really hard to let you know what are the expectations. Let me turn down my phone ring. We go to both staff and especially the review committee and the board puts a lot of effort in this language to make sure that the expectations are clear of what we're looking for on self-studies and site visits. And in addition to the standards and the compliance guide, you have the self-study review report. So it's not immediately available on this chart right here or sidebar, because if we try to make all of our documents available on the sidebar, then it just becomes very confusing. But if you go into documents, this is where we have kind of a general document repository of almost all of our important core documents to program directors and volunteers. And what you will see if you type in site visit, spell visit, we have recent and current site visit reports. These reports are the exact same documents that we give our volunteers. We actually give them the exact same links. And Candy, I'll hand this over to you in a bit, but the reason we want to do this is we want to make sure that and you can also find self-study review forms here as well, but we provide this as a resource for program directors so they have an idea of the exact documents that our reviewers will be looking for as they conduct the site visit itself. So Candy, I'll kind of hand it off back to you.
Yeah, so this is probably the most important document that I looked at prior to my site visit, because I went through the report, or I had my faculty help me go through the report. And we would look at what you want to look at are these questions like this one. Was there proof of minimum of certificate of completion given upon, completion, program completion? So these are things that you probably included in your self-study originally. And so if they're in your self-study, then I don't really worry too much about it. But on occasion, you'll see that there was some, let's see, I think I made that had a couple of examples. Oh, yeah. So Mark, go to 2A. There we go. So this is a big one that I know that when you do your self-study and this 2A standard where you're trying to show how you are evaluating your program, a lot of times this comes in bits and pieces, and it's very hard for a self-study reader to pull it all together to make sure that you are doing this correctly. So this is one of those areas that I look at this question and then I think, let me pull all of my review and assessment pieces together and have them together. And I'm a paper person, so I'll print them out, put them in a folder, label it 2A, and then that way when the site visitors ask, or as even before they ask, a lot of times I will say, here is my assessment all in one place so that they can look through that so that they can effectively answer this particular question. And so you'll see things like this throughout this document. And my advice is read the questions, make sure that you know where to put your hands on that information if they ask you for it, or if it was a concern in your self-study, then you want to make sure that you have proof of that documentation so that the site visitors can, again, check yes to all of these questions. But this was, you know, I also even used this when I was putting my self-study together so that I had the correct documents in my self-study. So this is a very valuable document that a lot of people don't think about printing and using, but it's available. And that's always my suggestion when people ask about what do I need to do to get ready? You know, I'll say, go through this report and make sure you can put your hands on all of these pieces of documents that could satisfy these questions.
And then, yeah, just to repeat, you can also find the self-study reviews here as well. I think I spelled self-study wrong, so I didn't use a hyphen. They are there. I was just in these the other day. So let's go back to here. 1 second. Beginning. Okay. Website tour is done. So we're moving closer. If we're thinking about this chronologically, we are moving a little bit closer to your site visit. So you're starting to plan specific details. I think, Candy, you already kind of went into this already, but once we started getting closer to the actual site visit day, do you have any additional recommendations about making sure that all essential parties that need to be interviewed for the site visit, administration, faculty, and students and alumni, to make sure to really lock down those times? I know you kind of commented on this already.
I did. And so once the date is set by NAACLS, you basically, when they send you, okay, it's time for your site visit, send us 3 sets of dates. And they will eventually, you know, settle on the date and let you know, okay, your site visit is going to be scheduled for this date. Once I have that finalized date from NAACLS, then at that point, I start contacting all of those people who need to be interviewed or need to be at a meeting for the site visit, start firming up those times and dates. And that's, you know, that's going to be your clinical facilities, your sometimes employers, sometimes clinical instructors, advisory committee. And we'll talk about how I like to, when I do a site visit, how I like to go through the interview process with these different stakeholders. So we'll cover that a little bit more detail later. But you need to reach out to all of your administration. A lot of times the president, vice president, you know, deans, associate deans, all like to be included. Maybe your financial dean likes to be included in these first meetings. So I usually send out an email, invite those parties, and who, you know, whoever can show up, shows up. And then the same thing with students. I usually make sure that I plan ahead and make sure that the students are either going to be on campus on the day they need to be interviewed, so with they're already a captive audience, and we just allow time throughout their day to meet with these site visitors. And then of course the alumni, we try to bring them in usually later in the afternoon because most of them are working. It really, you know, depends. Some of them are working 3 to 11. So who, you know, you kind of try to get as many students there and as many alumni there as you can. A lot of questions I get asked is, how many do we have to have? And there's not a prescribed number. I always just tell people, reach out to your last couple of graduation classes. I've sat and interviewed 15, 20 students. I've sat and interviewed 3. So there's a lot of variability in that depending on the program size, and it's hard to get students back to campus for a face-to-face. Um, if it's meetings that are set up in an alternate method, like through Zoom, then sometimes you could get more people to attend, but they don't really respond very much. They're kind of quiet. But really just setting up all of your interviews and making sure everybody's on board is pretty much where you're at this point.
Michelle, I'm gonna throw a little bit of this to you. Let's back up a few steps and talking about actual selecting dates and approving a team. Are there specific things that you see from a staff perspective that makes things go easier when you're reaching out to schedule dates with programs and getting teams approved?
No, not really. I think staff does a pretty good job once we received all of our site visit dates from all the programs. Then we will send out, we refer to it our call to volunteers, which consists of over 600 volunteers that we have. And they get about 2 weeks to respond and express their availability. We ask them to make sure they're not in any conflict of interest prior to saying they're available for a specific site visit. Then once we narrow it down to how many people can be available, then staff will go in individually to each site visitor and make sure they have not done a self-study, a site visit, anything of that of the program previously. We also try to our best to make sure that it's someone that's somewhere nearby, try to keep costs down for flights, or if they can drive. Sometimes it doesn't work out that way just upon the location or just people's availability. I think we had more issues when it was like virtual site visits. That's when dates were more limited, but now that we're fully face-to-face, I mean, we don't really see too many issues. Normally the approval process of the program director is fairly easy. Sometimes we get back every once in a while that this person happens to be part of their advisory committee because they're local. But we don't know that. But then we just swap it out for someone else. And then once again, the program director still has to approve that person. So the PDs have the option. I mean, if there's some hidden conflict of interest that we are not aware about, you know, if you were a faculty member 15 years ago and you still have a close relationship, the program director has that option to deny them. And we normally don't ask questions. We just respect the program director's wishes and then reassign.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think that's something that, since there's a lot going on in this chaotic process, that is good to point out that the program directors do have that ability to deny a member of the site visit team. And then it's just NAACLS staff will try very hard to quickly find another one. But obviously with smaller disciplines with smaller volunteers, that may add to a little bit of time to get details back of your site visit. Okay, Candy, oh, I went too far. This is the form you were talking about as an example schedule. This is found in our volunteer manual, page 21. After the volunteer manual, there are some example questions that you could be added or that you could expect on a site visit. We won't get into those questions specifically here, but Candy, I'll let you kind of walk through this example schedule.
So this is a pretty good example of how to start the process of setting up your meeting agenda. Typically day one, first thing in the morning, we tend to like to have a welcome conference. Again, it's a little different depending on if it's a university-based program versus a hospital-based program. Most of my experience is with the university-based programs, and so that's kind of the point of reference that I'm coming from. But this welcome conference really is any of your administration that likes to be there. Really, you can invite anybody, but most of the time it consists of just the program director and faculty. Typically the advisory committee we set up later on in the day by themselves. If your program has a medical director, then of course, you know, you might want to invite them. Your chairs, your deans, presidents, vice presidents, whoever, you know, you typically would invite to one of these meetings is who shows up at this 8:30 meeting. So that's very flexible. And again, there's not a prescribed list of who should be there, but whoever wants to come is of course welcome to come for this first visit. And then it's got this one and these are again can be moved around, but you want to be able to allow some time to meet with the program director. It may be that she or he has documents that they want to share with you prior to your review of all of their files. So a lot of times it's good to meet with them early in the day and again late in the day and throughout the day as things arise. But just, you know, an hour may be too much time. You know, you can play around with the limits and time limits for each one of these meetings. We do like to make sure that we schedule some time with your faculty, your part-time faculty, if they're able to come, and especially your full-time faculty, because there are questions you will see in this volunteer manual, the questions that follow this page 21 sample. There are some questions that the site visitors will ask the program faculty without the program director being present so that we can get honest feedback. So that's something that you want to make sure that you schedule. We always like to tour your facilities. I mean, we are there as a fact-finding team. So if you say you have this type of instrumentation or this type of classroom, then it is part of our responsibility as site visitors to walk through those areas and look at your stuff. Some site visitors like to go to your library, your computer labs, your admissions. I mean, it really is just going to depend on what your particular team member and site visit team want to see. But there's always needs to be some time to be able to walk around campus and look at some of your space. One thing, and it's got on here lunch from 12 to 1. One thing that I like to do and suggest that people do when I am the team coordinator for a site visit is do a working lunch and bring in, at this point, bring in your advisory committee, bring in your clinical instructors, bring in any of those other stakeholders that are hiring and training your students. First of all, they get a meal. It's kind of appreciation of being there, but during that meal, then the site visit team kind of uses it as a working lunch, and then they'll ask them the questions that they need to ask them so that they can check the boxes on the site visit report. And so a lot of times I'll schedule this for about an hour and a half.
We just got off for it. We're supposed to come back immediately.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Thank you. I gotta leave.
Okay, I think we can take it from here.
I'm so sorry.
That's all right. You are a volunteer. I appreciate you making the time you did.
Talk to y'all later.
Talk to you later, Candy.
Stop.
Okay, so we're close to the end anyway, so I can walk through this. So accommodations, I think the important thing here is that there's just clarity of what's going to happen with your site visitors. I mean, I would recommend just take a second, realizing these people may be on 2 or 3 flights to get to your location. Traveling, especially now, is always chaotic. Therefore, just make sure that they're comfortable. They know what's going to happen. They know where their hotel is going to be. If you're making the lodging yourself, if you're not making the lodging themselves, they know that that's their responsibility. Everybody's clear with that. Make sure that everyone is clear about whether the expectations are is that they should rent a car, and then that will be part of the expense report, or that you will pick them up. Again, that these little details of getting the team there and to the actual site visit are just clear to everybody, and everybody knows the expectations. I have heard a few times that it is not uncommon for a site visit team to have an unofficial getting to know you meal with the program director. This is not a requirement on the program director or the site visitors, depending on what time they come in and depending on, if they have to review documents, they just may not wish to have that meal, but at least it's an option and you can reach out. And again, to make sure everybody is aware of what's happening the day before. And if there is an opportunity for a meal for a casual conversation. Just going on over these details, making sure that everybody's comfortable with them. So really the focus can be on the site visit itself and making sure that the focus on presenting the program in a positive light and demonstrating compliance with the standards. I've also heard, and again, this is not required, but appreciated, that the workroom that you set up for the program director, I'm not the program director, the reviewers, just has ample space, is private, has ample space for them to kind of spread out materials, especially if they have to review a lot of paper materials. And just so that they have the basic necessities there to focus and get work done, maybe some water, maybe some things to make sure that they stay refreshed, things of that nature. We're not looking for you to spoil the site visitors, but again, making sure they are in a comfortable place to get the work they need done. Some things to keep in mind of what you should have available for the actual site visit. As Candy mentioned earlier, review all of the self-study concerns that you originally got. Even if you provided those self-study response documents, I would have those documents easily accessible again in case a site visitor has a question about follow-up about some of those documents you presented in your self-study review response. As we addressed before, the self-study report and the standard compliance guide are great resources you have to try to determine what documents you should have available, so there's not a second scrambling and stressing you out during the site visit. Oh, actually, I went back forwards, my fault. So it's been recommended that you have hard copies of handbooks, curriculum, and textbooks available. If these things are online, I would recommend that you make sure that the reviewers have access to the links and passwords when you are not around. They may, in their private discussions, they may want to double check something. Just make sure that those passwords are available and they know where those passwords and that login information is. And that you don't overburden yourself. We know that program directors are all overworked, but if you can free your schedule up a little bit during this day, so if during kind of this consultation time between the site visitors, when you aren't around them or in active conversation with them, if they need to reach out to you over phone, you are they can get in touch with you easy to address any questions.
I was gonna say, I've seen some program directors in the site visit teams, they'll share cell phone numbers so then they can just text them. Sometimes meetings end short and they can move things up if it's possible, or just even texting them to say like, where would I find this document? Something quick as an option too.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you, Michelle. Team responsibility. So yeah, the site visit team, and Candy kind of addressed this already, the site visit team is charged with verifying the accuracy of the information presented in the self-study. So when you look at both the standard compliance guide and that site visit report we looked at before, you will see that there are areas that they will note that are unresolved compliance issues from the self-study that they are tasked to follow up on. And then there's also site visit specific items they need to look at because it's things we can't determine compliance on based on the self-study itself. The volunteers are, it's always good to remember that site visitors are volunteers, but they're also educators and practitioners. They are truly there to hopefully present an experience that will be beneficial to you as a program director, will not only ensure the quality of education that you're already presenting, but maybe through the standards and the compliance issues, improve it. And we try really hard, and we're lucky that we have a wide group of volunteers that are focused on being professional, objective, friendly, and providing the feedback constructively. Final steps, when you, at the end of your site visit, you will get an informal verbal report from the site visit team. That will be a part of your schedule. It's usually the last thing that happens. We're not interested in presenting you drastic surprises at the actual site visit report. So it's my understanding that it's very likely that this verbal site visit will be almost identical to the actual official site visit report that you'll receive. That being said, after the site visit, the site visitors will get together to do a final review on all items, and they will finalize that site visit report. They will submit it to staff, and then staff will submit it to you. You will get a date where your site visit response is due. It is not uncommon that there are no concerns left over with the site visit report. If this happens, you will still be required to submit a response, even if that response is an email to the staff saying, I concur with the findings. Also, a very important part of this that I think gets overlooked is our evaluation process. Among the many materials, and Michelle, can you help me out when the program directors get the site visit evals in the process?
So once we receive, NAACLS staff receives your official site visit report and we send it to you, you will receive also the post site visit evaluation link as well. That's also the same time that the site visit team will receive the evaluations too.
Okay, thank you. So we really want honest feedback on the performance of the site visit team, any aspect of the site visit, there's specific questions we ask. These findings, these findings are anonymous. These findings aren't really handled until after the site visit and after the site visit report is done. So it's not like the site visit team will be working on your final report and they're notified that there may have been something you didn't like. We really do respect the privacy of this as much as possible because we want our program directors to be completely honest so we can continually improve and evaluate our processes. We have a whole standing committee of our board of directors that reviews these evaluations to monitor how our site visits are and recommend improvements to our process. So it really is very important that we get that feedback back to the office, and that feedback is sincere and honest. Okay, we're going to enter the general Q&A right now. Before we go to the Q&A, we're going to do a plug for our DLPs, which we've mentioned a few times. So DLP stands for Discipline Lead Person. These are members of our review committees that have been appointed. Very often they volunteer for the position, but they've been appointed to help program directors with standard compliance issues. They're not necessarily there to advise for whole process issues. The example I always give, and if you've heard me at a workshop or one of these before, is that they're not necessarily there to review your whole self-study or your whole progress report. But what they can help with is if you have specific compliance questions about specific standards, or maybe one or two standards. If you have questions about process, that should go to staff, individuals like Michelle and myself. If you don't know where the question goes, always reach out to staff first. We're the ones paid. We are very lucky to have a group of very dedicated volunteers, but we want to make sure that we keep work off their plates if it's not specifically directly addressed to them. So, and as I mentioned that before we go to Q&A, I saw that we had some volunteers on this call. So thank you for volunteering and thank you for jumping on, whether that's from perspective as a program director, which most, if not all of you are, or if you're just curious as a volunteer. So we can go into Q&A right now. Michelle and I will do our best. So let's start out with Diane. Diane, we are still in the middle of a pandemic, you're right. And can groups of stakeholders meet via Zoom? The concern is with all of these entities meeting face-to-face during a pandemic. So what I would suggest is, first of all, if you didn't see the board of directors update from the last Dr. NAACLS, is that the board of directors has currently paused the virtual site visit option, so all site visits will be in person. However, I don't think it was the intent, I personally don't think it was the intent of the board to make sure each aspect of that site visit is on campus. I would suggest, and specifically with the pandemic, will keep on fluctuating depending on the strain, depending on the severity of it. I would just collaborate with your site visitors, see who they want, see who they need on campus, see where their comfort level is with virtual or Zoom when it comes to stakeholders such as alumni or a huge group of advisory committee. I always emphasize that while yes, they're volunteers, and yes, they're site visitors, and yes, they're representing NAACLS, they're also program directors. So they really do identify and very often sympathize with the challenges presented to a program director preparing for a site visit, especially during a pandemic. Amanda is having issues receiving from emails from NAACLS. Amanda, reach out to, I don't know, usually on the backside of this, when program directors go through the program director approval process, our database is updated, and generally our emails are updated as well. So I would reach out to your specific program service coordinator, just to let them know they're having problems receiving emails from NAACLS. It's hard to tell from just this message, is this something on our end? Is this a firewall issue? Where that problem is. But I would start with your specific program service coordinator, and then try to resolve the issue from there.
I think she's referring to the NAACLS news.
Oh, the NAACLS news. Yeah, so we are looking into that. The NAACLS news is hosted by a third-party site called WordPress, meaning we don't have a lot of control over that subscription. I've resubscribed to the NAACLS news with Gmail accounts and other accounts from having this problem or hearing about this problem, and those news subscription accounts get the emails. So it's something we're still looking into. It's something we don't have 100% control over because it's just not our delivery system. It's not something as easy as just changing something in our database in this circumstance. But we'll still keep looking at it, and we'll try to resolve the issue and notify WordPress. Thank you, Michelle. Any other questions? What is the process for the OneDrive account? I will not be able to email on self-study. So we use Box, and we try to narrow down to Box because otherwise it's hard for staff to track what is where. There are two options. When you're submitting your self-study, NAACLS can send you a link where you can just essentially upload it or drag and drop. When you get farther in the process and you're submitting multiple materials and you may wish to organize those multiple materials and have a little more control, you will need to sign up for a free Box account. Well, if you wish to have that control, we don't require you to sign up for a Box account. If you just want to upload stuff and leave it to the reviewers and you feel like you've labeled everything kind of appropriately, that's completely fine. But should you choose to want more editing access, you will need to sign up for a Box account. Those accounts are free. You don't need to pay for anything, but if this is just for a self-study, we will email you an upload link where you don't have to sign up for anything. And I see you have another question, Ramona, go ahead. Also, if you want to raise your hand, I can give you access to talk. Questions can be dropped in the Q&A box or, okay. You can talk now, Ramona, you'll probably have to unmute.
Okay. So I guess I'm not really sure about what you're mentioning about that link to, I guess, upload documents. So I just was under the impression that all I needed to do was attach them to the self-study itself. Am I incorrect in that?
Oh, I misunderstood. I apologize. I thought you were talking about uploading the whole self-study itself. So yeah, let's
Well,
back
no,
up.
that's fine too. Yeah.
Okay.
All of
So-
that is good news or new news to me. So
Yeah, I mean, I'm screen sharing here, so let's just walk through it a little bit. Give me 1 second
Okay.
to pull up a document. Almost there. Okay, so this is the self-study template. We do have specific instructions about making attachments on the self-study template. So
Mhm.
for the documentation required by the self-study, you are correct. This goes on this template. You will see, that's not a great example, but yeah, you will see for example, if you're a 1A sponsor, you need to add the letter saying your institutional is
Mhm.
accredited. This is how you add it. And there's additional instructions how to do it here. So when you submit the self-study and when that submission date is established, program services will email you a submission link. You click on that link, it will bring up a web interface that I believe it gives you an option to drag and drop, or you can click on it and find it in a Windows Explorer and actually upload it. So that's how you submit the whole self-study. Attachments go inside the self-study and the one template is submitted as a whole. So you can either, if you don't want to sign up for a Box account, I'm kind of at my personal limit of how many random accounts I have, so it's completely understandable. You can, when you, and Michelle, please correct me if I'm wrong. You can also upload, you can submit your self-study review response via email, or if it's a little larger, so a lot of documentation, we'll give you that submission link again. If you can't track that email because it's been a few months, we can give you that link again. You can upload it or email your response. Staff will make sure that the self-study review, and the self-study review response is in that Box account. Box is the name of the cloud service we chose. If there are additional items that the site visitors want to see, you can again use that one submission link that we gave you, or if you want to just say, hey, I got to add 5 or 6 documents, I want to make sure they're organized and look good, or you just want a little more access, that's when you have to sign up for that free account, because we can't adjust your permissions without an actual profile account. So, but again, that's optional.
Okay. And that submission link that you mentioned, was that in the, well, it might have been there and I didn't see it. Is that something you would send later, or was that in, I don't recall seeing that in the program director approval letter that I got.
Normally, once we're approaching your self-study due date, NAACLS staff will send out an email to all programs that have a self-study coming up saying if you need the self-study link, please respond back, and then we'll create the specific one for each account.
Okay, I was planning on sending that next month in August, so I guess.
I believe I'm your program coordinator, so just let me know and I can create it for you.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, those are good questions, and it's an important clarity to make. These links aren't directly associated with a program. So you don't have a static link that anytime you need to submit something, that's your profile link. It's not something that's complex where there is a program profile where we collect all your information. These submission links are generally tied specifically to the self-study. And then the actual self-study review process. So as Michelle said, we'll get them to you when we approach your self-study due date to make sure we have it for that self-study. And if anybody else on the call hasn't received it or can't find it, we can easily get it back to you. All right. Ramona, I removed your permission to talk. If you have another question coming up later, just go ahead and raise it again. Are there any other questions? don't see any in the chat. I don't see any hands up, so I will go ahead. We're about at our hour too. Boy, time flies. So thanks everybody for making the time. If you think of something directly after this, please feel free to reach out. We should have something on the NAACLS news soon about the next workshop, which will be a preview of the next Talk NAACLS, which is a preview of the November workshop. If you haven't seen, we have details on the November workshop, which will be a hybrid workshop on the NAACLS news, and also it's accessible on the homepage of the NAACLS website. So stay safe, everybody, and we'll talk to you in a few weeks.